So you are planning on going on a missions trip, but you don't speak their language. However, this shouldn't concern you because you have extraordinary nonverbal communication skills. But is that enough? This presentation will be by Michael Davis Arnold, Serena Chandler, Seth Van Ast, and Troy Holstad. The Bible tells us in Matthew 28, verse 19, "Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." That's why CU Go trips are so important. They give students the opportunity to make disciples in other nations through new learning experiences and seeing the similarities and differences between other cultures. For instance, this summer, because of CU Go projects, I was able to go to Europe. And during my time in Europe, I stayed in a house in Slovakia where they only spoke Slovak. So there was no chance for us to communicate verbally. But we could communicate through our nonverbal skills and glorify God in that way. If we are called to be disciples in a land where we are unfamiliar with, should Cornerstone provide classes to understand nonverbal communication across cultures? To answer that question, we need to look at two studies. Ekman's study on universal facial expressions and the study of Ottavia, DeStachio, Forelli, and Pons' study on nonverbal development in children.
So let's begin with Paul Ekman's studies. You might have heard Paul Ekman's name before. He's famous for his 6 universal emotions, and we kind of want to dissect that very study. So Paul Ekman kind of had this theory that no matter where you went on Earth, there were 6 universal emotions displayed amongst people. But how would he prove this? Well, Ekman decided that the best way to prove this was to find a group of people that had no idea about Western culture. They never been to Europe. They never been to America. So he searched long and hard. And after some time, he went to Papua New Guinea to the South Four tribe. The South Four tribe was a very isolated community that had no experience with culture outside of their own. So they were perfect for this research. In fact, he got 189 adults and 130 children of the South Four tribe to be a part of this research. Now, he had to compare these. He needed a control group. So for his control group in this study, he got 23 well-cultured Americans. These Americans knew how society worked. They knew emotions in the Western world. So if someone said a joke, people would laugh. These well-cultured Americans kind of put those nonverbal cues together. So how he did the research was he kind of made it like a test. He provided a sentence or a story, and he had the person read the story. He had translators for the South Four tribe read them the story. And then they had to pick a picture with a face of an emotion, a nonverbal emotion. So maybe a story would have a joke in it. Maybe it'd be funny. Well, the person would look at maybe like a sad face, a happy face, or maybe a content face. And they would know to circle the happy face that went along with that story. So that was kind of the project that he did. So the variables of this study, the independent variables for this was the stories, those lines I was talking about, and also the faces that they had to circle. The dependent variable in this study was the decision that the South Four tribe had to make. These tribesmen would, like I said, look at the stories and make a decision. This was dependent upon the story itself and then the faces. The controlled variable in this group was where these people came from. Ekman controlled where the South Four tribe came from. Ekman controlled that there be Americans to be the control group in this study. Well, after compiling the data, he put it in tables and charts. This made it so it would be easier to identify if there was indeed 6 universal emotions. The idea was that if he could show that the tribesmen had about the same success rate as the Americans, that emotions are universal. No matter where you go, the people will react in the same way. So if you're trying to identify nonverbal cues, you'll identify the 6 same emotions you would hear, say, in America as the people in Papua New Guinea. Ekman does a great job, an exquisite job of kind of giving us step-by-step instructions of how to do his research. It's very repeatable. He provides a way that we can kind of understand what he was doing and do it ourselves. Ekman also does a great job of using no anecdotal evidence. He doesn't use any anecdotal evidence. There's nothing where he's just kind of theorizing to himself. He backs it up by statistics. He backs it up by research and actual facts to make it true, to make it a good science study. As of being peer-reviewed, his work is very peer-reviewed. Many scientists go over his work, make sure that everything was legit, of that nature. And we can see this in Bolt and Putzka in 2003. They kind of went over Ekman. They agreed with him. And they even kind of furthered his study with children with autism. They want to see if children with autism dealt with these same universal emotions. As well, Desire, Bozy, and Vezier in 2002 kind of went over his work, and they also agreed with his studies. And they even try to add it to animals. Okay, so what was the results of Ekman's study? Were there actually 6 universal emotions, or was that just a bunch of hooey and it didn't mean anything? Well, Ekman found that the South Fork tribe had just as much skill as the Americans in identifying nonverbal emotions. He figured out that no matter where you go on the globe, you'll see happiness, you'll see sadness, you'll see fear, you'll see anger, you'll see surprise, you might even see disgust. That irregardless of where you grew up, whether you were in contact with the world, you're connected to the internet, or if you're just isolated community, you would show these 6 emotions. So if you were on a CU Go project, if you went somewhere, you would see these very emotions there as you do here. So let's go on over to the Italian study, I like to call it. The study done by Ottavia, De Stasio, De Chico, Ferroli, and Pons. Now, they looked at Ekman's study and they said, now, are children just born with this recognition of these 6 universal emotions, or do they learn them? Do they develop and learn these emotions? Can they pick up these nonverbal cues right out of birth or later on in life? So to do this study, the group brought their study to a school in Italy, where they took 366 children, ages from 3 to 10 years old, and they provided them a test, much like the way Ekman provided his test. However, instead of a story or a line to go off of, they used a comic strip. They provided something more relatable to the children. So the kids would have this comic strip, and it would kind of show something funny. And then they would have to pick out of 3 faces which face went best with the comic strip. So if it was something really funny in the comic, they would pick that happy face to go along with that comic. So there was no need for a control group in this study because they were comparing the children from each age range. The children were chosen just by if they attended the school. They were given a parent permission slip, and as long as they got that filled out, they would be part of the study. So let's look at the variables in this study. The independent variable would be the comic strips and the faces they had to choose from. The dependent variables would be the decisions that the students had to make. And then the control variable would be the location of the school. They chose to go to that Italian school in their project. So how do they kind of put the facts together? They use tables and statistics to present the scores of the children. They wanted to show through mathematics how these children develop as they get older. Again, they provide nice step-by-step directions of how they did the research, which made this a very repeatable piece of research. We could duplicate it if need be. As well, they use no anecdotal evidence. They use, especially in this one, they use definitely a lot of statistics through the test to kind of provide their end result. And this is also peer-reviewed. It was published in the Journal of Genetic Psychology, which is peer-reviewed, by Dennis Thompson and Tenet Osler. So what did we find out? We found out that as children develop and get older, they also develop their nonverbal recognition.
So back to the original question. Should Cornerstone provide classes for students going on CU Go project trips on nonverbal communication? Ekman's study showed that no matter where you are in the world, there are six facial expressions that link to emotions that you can understand no matter where you are, regardless of country, race, ethnicity, or language. And in the Italian study, it shows how people develop their nonverbal communication to the point of clarity and comprehension the older they get. So if you think you need nonverbal classes, the answer is no, you don't.
Thanks you guys for watching. We come down without these sources.